Whether you keep them in your home or love to see them in theirs, these are the creatures that bring us all together.
Reptiles. We're going to be delving into the experiences of reptile lovers from around the block and around the world. This is the Reptile Talk Podcast.
Boom. What is going on, everybody? This is Jeremy from Brass Fan Reptiles.
And I'm Rob, and I'm keeping it real.
And I feel like now I want to do the SpongeBob jellyfish dance music coming into it so that people can just... Oh, man. I'm telling you guys, if you are not watching on YouTube, you are missing these very funny intros because it just sounds like I'm a fucking maniac for the first 15 seconds.
Like, Jeremy just thinks at the beginning of this podcast is a joke every time.
Yeah, every single time. I don't take anything seriously. Meanwhile, it's like Rob like mooning the camera. Like,
listen, that only happened once, okay?
Oh man, too freaking funny. What's up, dude? How are you doing, man?
I am doing okay. I did a little bit of herping while I was working today, and I got to see a red belly snake, a DK's, and a 5-line skink all at the same house, and I was like, yes,
Ooh.
yes. Yeah,
Come on, home diversity.
Yeah, I was like spraying down, and then all of a sudden the red belly snake like shot off through the leaves, and I was like, oh damn, and I like grabbed it real quick, took a quick picture of it, and then like put it down, and then I'm going along, and then a leaf moves, and I see a big pregnant DK's like right underneath the leaf, and I was like, that is freaking awesome.
Heck yeah.
So that was good. And then I think this weekend's supposed to have decent weather, so I'm sure that I'm going to be doing a little bit of herping this weekend to see if I can't find some copperheads or something.
Oh yeah.
Honestly, I really just want to go back to the hognose snake spot because there's one spot near me that has like a lot of hognose sightings, and I'm like, if I can pull that off, I will be hyped.
I will be jealous, but also hype.
Yeah. Last Saturday, I literally did 10 miles of hiking in this area, and all I saw was 2 black racers that got away from me. So,
we don't need that.
Yeah, there's lots of toads, but like, oh man, heartbreak.
Yeah. Oof. It's not always magic, guys.
No. You know, I knew that I was hiking a lot when at the end my legs started to get sore. I was like, uh-oh, I've made a mistake.
Oh man,
I made a mistake. Usually my legs don't hurt. Like I can do 8 miles, no big deal. Those last 2 miles, I was like, oh man, I'm gonna feel this tomorrow. I know it.
Oof. I'm here for it though.
Regret.
I'm here for it. You're gonna have killer calves the next time I see you.
Probably, yeah. And then I got like Borneo eggs should be hatching next week for the first clutch of eggs, so that should be tight. Skunk to skunk stuff, so that'll be cool. But I mean, that's pretty much where I'm at. Before we roll into things too, and I'm going to ask you in a second, but also tonight's episode is brought to you by Black Box Cages. Boom, check them out right over here behind me. I am loving these enclosures so far, and honestly, I cannot wait to get some more because just the fact that I didn't have to modify them is amazing. It just makes my life so much easier. And I've got snakes in these enclosures now, and they are absolutely loving them, and means that I get to move some other stuff over here and give some upgrades and move some stuff around. So I'm super hyped. Black Box Cages, make sure you check them out. Quickest turnaround time in the game.
Do it.
Nicest enclosures. Just check them out. Yeah, what are you doing? If you don't have a black box, what are you doing?
Absolutely, man. And I don't know if they still are, but it was on their Instagram that they're actually looking to hire somebody, which must mean that they're expanding, which is that much better. So go check them out. They definitely, the cages are just amazing. And you're going to be so thrilled to get that package and be like, this enclosure is everything. Like right off the rip, like just right off the rip. So go check them out, blackboxcages.com. Check them out on Instagram and Facebook and everything too. And if you use code Reptile Talk at checkout, you can save a little bit of money off the top. And who doesn't want to save money when groceries cost $1,000 every other week? So
stressing me out.
Yeah, bro. Heck yeah,
so, man. How have you been? How are you doing?
I'm alive, so I think that's a good thing.
Better than alternative.
This is true. Fresh off the Raleigh Expo last weekend, which was a blast. Yeah, today was a hectic day down in the snake room, just moving things around. Had to do a trip to the dump. Pulled another ball python clutch. Woohoo! More leopard gecko eggs this on the ground this week. And I'm growing impatient now because the first clutches are due to hatch within the next like 2 weeks. So it's now that time where I start to periodically haunt the incubator. Because I'm like, hey, any day now there's going to be a little face popping out of there.
Dude, I forgot I got corn snake eggs yesterday too. Or 2 days ago or something. I forgot. I incubate them on the shelf, so I literally just like set them up in the vermiculite and then pop them on the shelf, and I'll see them whenever they end up coming out.
Yep, exactly. It's perfect.
And I might actually try and double clutch that girl because she eats voraciously. So
heck yeah, man.
And the babies from last year are finally ready to go on their own and all that jazz. So
yeah,
I know there's some people who have been waiting, and I gotta do that. So, but I'm super excited for tonight's episode, man.
Yes.
Are you ready? Are you ready? Let's freaking get him in here.
Bam.
Nature Nate, what's good, man?
What up, dude?
Hey everyone, how's it going?
Partying,
it's going good, man.
How's your day?
It's good. It's really good. Nothing better than a Friday talking reptiles. I know it's Nature Nate's Geckos, but I put a skink on my shoulder.
That's still
close
worse.
enough. It's close enough.
I feel like that's a thing that happens when people are like, they name their stuff after like one type of thing, and then all of a sudden they like branch out into all these other things.
Yeah.
As long as you still have geckos, I give it the pass.
Yes. Yeah.
I've seen people where they like name their business something pythons and they completely get out and they just do like something else. Like,
yeah. I actually saw a really beautiful pivot. I'm sure you guys remember Flawless Crested Geckos.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He would come to the shows like huge. I mean, he was like a muscle man, like winter competitor or something like that.
Yes.
And it was Flawless Crested Geckos. People would fly from Korea to meet them and get their geckos. I remember one time, I'm not going to say the number, but the number of geckos they sold in the first 3 hours of one of those California super shows was like most people's, like, it was insane. It was so built around this. And I saw recently they've moved into ball pythons. And so now they call themselves, Jeremy, what is it? It's like flawless
creations. Yeah. Flawless exotic creations. Something like that. Yeah. Will and Audra. Shout out to those. I love those guys.
Yeah, they're really cool.
Yeah.
Love them. But yeah, it's a great but yeah, I recently moved kind of into skinks a little bit. I have a lot of skinks now. They're so intelligent and easy to feed and insanely chill. Like some of them. And so yeah, I'm like, I'm gonna change it to Nature Nate's Geckos and Skinks. Nature Nate's like easy pets and anoles. Because I keep a little bit of everything. I actually got started with insects was like the first thing that I did. And I still keep like 16 species of roach. I do have a couple snakes now, which is new to me and is pretty fun. I'll say skinks are probably the gateway because they're just like the halfway between.
Yeah.
Even my wife is like, I don't know how I feel about these skinks. They're really like, they look like a snake. I'm like,
they're very snake-like.
yeah. But she's cool. She let me. I recently got into garters, kind of for the same reason. So I have a California garter, the California red-sided.
Yeah.
And I'd love to breed those because they're live bears. I can't believe garters are not
more popular
table because it's like almost near room temp. Like you can get away with low or no heat in an emergency. A lot of breeders keep them with no heat as babies.
Yep.
And man, the diversity of food, like they eat pretty much every time, unless you have like kind of a more like skittish species. They eat earthworms, which is like Walmart, $5. They eat fish, PetSmart, $20 for like months. They'll eat these, which you're already getting for like a ton of other species. They're incredible. They probably eat your finger if you let them. They're
they will.
Yeah, 100% guaranteed will.
And they're really smart. It's one of the only species that like, not only does it eat every time, but it follows you. They're intelligent. They're colorful. And the live bearing, most of what I keep does not require an incubator. And that's kind of on purpose. It's just like one more complication, and then being a gecko guy, everything's room temp mostly, or like in situ. So it's pretty cool to be like, okay, cool. I could, if I wanted to produce these, just one day I'm gonna wake up and there's just gonna be like babies in the tank, and the parents aren't gonna eat them. Oh, they're so cool. I also have the checkered garters. And I have an albino checkered, which is literally a yellow and purple snake with red. I mean, oh my gosh, those red eyes when they stare at you. They just take forever to grow. Snakes do, and I'm just like, because geckos, you can get them to almost like ready to breed in like a year and a half easily. And snakes, it's like kind of, I mean, you can power feed and stuff, but it's like a 2, 3, 4, 5 year process. Especially for like some of those king snakes, take a long time to get up. I have like, my buddy's got one of those palmetto corns. He bought it almost a year ago, and I'm like, this thing is the same size as the last time I was.
Oh man,
it's definitely a little bit more of a game of patience when it comes to snakes, and it also depends on like what kind of snakes, because I've seen people breed corns and stuff at like a year and a half old, almost 2 years old. And then like scrubs, I'm looking at 5, 6, 7 years old before they'll reproduce. So it's completely different.
So what we're saying is, if you want to breed snakes, get them when you're a teenager so that you can enjoy them. Dude, otherwise you're going to get a baby scrub python at 35 years old, and at 40 you're going to pray to God a miracle happens.
That's how Brian Barczyk did it. I remember reading his story when I was a few years ago, and he was like a kid, and he bought his first house on snakes that he raised in his like mom's basement. I'm like, man, that is inspiring. That is really cool.
Yep. Absolutely. Especially when his mom didn't like snakes.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm just going to commandeer your whole basement, Ma. Like, you don't have to worry about coming down here anymore.
Yeah, that was a crazy, I think it was in Reptiles. What a great story. He was like, what's, and it's like, you know, it's so easy. I feel like that's a big thing in the gecko hobby too, is everyone starts with cresteds because it's almost like they were made to be pets. You know, it's like room temp, no special heat, no special light.
You don't have to do bugs.
If you don't like bugs, you know, especially if you're like a mom or a dad and you're like, yeah, the bugs kind of creep me out.
No bugs in the house. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so easy. And then I noticed with cresties, right? It's like you can have all these tubs, all these racks. And then a lot of people have so many cresties because, you know, compared to maybe some of the more intelligent snakes or like a monitor or something, they're not like the most interactive. They're great for handling, just like pick them up, they hang out, but they don't really like chase food. They don't really recognize you as like another like sentient being. So you end up collecting, you like collect morphs, or you do what I did and you're like, wait, there's other geckos in this genus that also eat the fruit goo. And like that was, I got a garg, and then I got a Urodactyloides, and then I was like, okay, I gotta get a Chihuahua. But the price was so high. You know, Chihuahua are incredible animals.
Yeah.
And I had to wait until I found a good deal on one on like Craigslist or whatever. And then I was like, oh, lychee. Oh my gosh, I need it. But that's like they're like $1,000. And like that hasn't changed at all. I didn't want to raise a baby because like Rob was saying, like a lychee to get to like really like breedable is always at least like, it's really 3 to 5 years, especially
at least 3. Yeah.
For the big ones, it's like 5 before you want to start pairing those. And man, if you're in it for like, okay, I want to recoup my initial investment.
Oh, bad
God
idea.
help you. Like you'll be on a different insurance plan. You'll be at a different employer.
Yeah.
Moved addresses.
For real. That shit's wild.
So true. It's so true.
What did you guys? Oh, sorry. Go for it.
No, I was gonna say funny story. So for Raleigh, my partner and I stayed with Brett and Gabby from Morph Menagerie.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Love them to death. It was his first time seeing Leachianus like in the enclosure, and you know the leaky anus poo streaks that happen on the front of the enclosure. And he loves geckos. Like behind me are like our cresteds and our raise up gargoyles and stuff. And he looks at me and he's like, okay, now I understand. Never do I want that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like, never do I want to clean an enclosure and be happy about it, and 5 minutes later be like, oh God, why?
Oh my God.
You know, I love Brett and Gabby. They're actually opening a pet store. And to have people as intelligent and like with such great care as they will. I mean, it's going to be totally different than a lot of these like pet stores that you go in there and you're like, oh man, this king snake's in like a 12 by 12 by 12, and it's like a 4-foot snake or whatever. Like they're cohabiting with 5 cresties. Like for someone who actually cares about reptiles, who knows the husbandry, and people are always asking like, oh, where in the triangle can I go to find a reptile store? And for most of the time, you'll either say like, you know, whatever, like Wake Outfitters, which is more of like a fish shop. Or you have nothing to tell them. It's like, well, go to PetSmart and try not to cry when you see a cresty, you know, in a shoebox. And so I'm just so excited for them. I think their opening is like next weekend or something.
Really?
June 15th, I think. June 15th was their shot date, I think. Yeah.
But they were telling me about the lychees because I have one and I've kept them through the years. And you'll clean the glass, especially if people are coming over. You want to show them like, hey, this is, of course, I'm keeping them through, I swear, like really well. And they will literally, it's like they know that you come from the front of the glass.
Yeah.
It's their own visual barrier. I'm like, please don't do this. And a couple times they've even gotten it out of like the Exoterra. Like I keep them in like a giant Exoterra.
It's that little gap.
They got she like pooped up like through the screen. And I walked in and I was like, oh, what smells like fishy, you know, in my room? And I was like, man, I'm really thinking about selling you. I was just like, I was in a bad mood. I was like, this is not fun.
Man.
You know, there's nothing like the cresties don't do that. Gargoyles don't do it. And it has to be the biggest lizard. I mean, we're talking about a foot long. I mean, it's a lot of liquid volume.
Oh God. It's so true, man. It's so true. So everybody listening, this is your reminder to get any other species from that island.
Yeah, any other New Caledonian species is better than lychees.
I like to compare them to like the indigo snakes of the gecko world. It's
like, oh my God, yes.
It's really handleable. Like they're beautiful, impressive animals, but poop shooters.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wear a lab coat.
That's why I didn't like the Bolins. They do the same shit where they like to poop and then like smear it up the sides. I'm like, dude, get out of here, man. What are you doing? Like, stop that.
Oh no. Yeah, it's brutal. And some of them are tank aggressive too. Like not indigos, but like lychees can.
Lychees.
Yes.
One in particular would like launch across the tank, and to the point where I was really like, wow, this is kind of a rough. If you're going for like a pet experience, this is a really rough one.
It's not good.
I'm like, food, you know, and I really had to be like, okay, like she's on this side of the door. I started coming in with bark and like kind of holding it in front of her face, so she couldn't see what my other hand was doing. And I'm like, man, this is like, because I think a lot of people, you know, we were talking before about like, okay, I'm Nature Nate's geckos, and like I have 25 plus species of gecko across the globe. But now I'm slowly moving into like anoles. I have a couple of those. I have a couple skinks. I have a couple snakes. I have a turtle that I'm like rehabbing. And so, you know, it's like, okay, so what is the common theme? And for me, it's just like, what is like enjoyable? Like, you know, you've seen like Clint's reptiles videos and Wicked's Wicked Reptiles. And like, for me, it always kind of comes back to like the 5 criteria of like, okay, is it relatively low maintenance? Is it out often? Is it pretty? Can I handle it if I need to? Like, I don't necessarily need this to be like a puppy dog, but it's really nice if I want to get a weight or if I need to clean the tank or something, that it's not gonna murder me. And then like, is it easy to feed is a new one that I'm really into. So like I have a Euromastix, I have a Chuckwalla, just stuff that like, I need some plants. Like, cool. I have like a pollinator garden that has dandelions and I pick them once or twice a week. Like you can't beat fresh greens for green eating, you know, same with the beardy. So it's cool to have like, I have stuff that eats dog food, like the Schneider skink that has now crawled onto like the back part of my shirt. I swear he's still here.
Oh yeah, there he is.
There's your thumbnail for the episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like they go like, so that's a new one, Schneider skinks, right? And there's a lot of people now trying to breed them where before they were just one of these like $40 imports. And now everyone's like, no, let's stop that immediately. Let's see if we can breed these. So I have a group. I'm trying to be one of the only people in the US that breeds them just to take that pressure off of the ones in like, because they come from like kind of like the Morocco, like North Africa. They call them Berber skinks. There's like a couple of different names. And actually Philip Leitz from Arids Only has successfully gotten eggs. My big theory with them, because they're so protein aggressive, like they love dog food. I mean, they will all like dog pile, pun intended. Like, because I keep them in a group. You'll have like 4 of them at the dish. As soon as I put it in, they smell it with their tongues like a snake. They all like pop out with their little dirt hats because they love to be like, and it's stupid cute. And they're like kind of fossorial, right? So they all bask in the daytime for the first couple hours. They come out, they eat the food, and then they all retreat. And once they've been like warmed up. And I'm pretty positive. It's like, I think a lot of people have kept these over the years and have gotten eggs that were fertile. And they probably ate the egg.
Damn.
Eat scrambled eggs. So it's really like, do you have a big enough setup where you can have like a paver and like a moist spot for them to lay? And then are you checking it often enough? Because in the wild, they lay the eggs and they scoot, right? Probably never to be seen again. They have this huge open area. And in captivity, you might have them in a 40, a 50, tank, which is great. But you have to be checking for eggs. And if you have a large collection, sometimes it's not feasible to check for eggs all the time.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you guys, what did you think of the Raleigh show?
I didn't say
yeah. I've seen and experienced better Raleigh shows, but for me, like, selling snakes at the shows is great. Obviously, it's the big reason why we vend those shows, but I just enjoy hanging with folks and getting the chance to talk, and be it with other vendors or just, I like the fact that I go to a show and I've got like 10 different species on the table. So people, like, I'm getting people of all different interests in the hobby that come by and is like, oh, I didn't think I was going to see one of those, like, I mean, Rob had brought a couple of scrub pythons to show off, and like people were like looking behind the table being like, oh, like, what's that? And I'm like, fuck, now I need a scrub python just to show off, to get people to walk over to the table.
There's so many people who are like, what the hell is that? I don't even know what kind of snake that is. I'm like, okay.
Keep it moving.
Just keep walking.
That's something that's like, it's so special in the hobby, is how people hyper specialize. Like Rob, you have really opened my eyes to the world of scrub pythons. And then, Jeremy, seeing those incredible red, those are the blood pythons. What are they?
The bloods.
Bloods and short tail and stuff.
I mean, the colors that you're producing right now, and it's like, it's fun for me too. Like I'm kind of ADD, so it's fun to go down the rabbit hole of like, I don't know nothing about like tree boas, but like whatever is going on here is really cool. And then all I have to do is like pop on a podcast, and I can become, an hour expert on. Same with like Mike Curtin has opened my eyes to rhino rat snakes. I am obsessed. The old world colubrids. I mean, wow, it's crazy that they took this long to get where they are, because everyone thought, oh, it's a snake. Bake the heck out of it. They love heat. And it's like, no, wait, actually, pretty close to room temperature. It's actually easier than you're making this.
Yes.
Right? Yes, humidity is important, but it's not a frog. Don't soak it. Like, it's still going to get scale rot. It's like a cresty too. I think the all New Caledonian geckos, people, when they start, they totally get humidity wrong. It's like, you live in the South now. So I'll tell you right now, I keep a hydrometer like next to me all day, every day. I'm already at like, depending on the room, I can easily be at 60%.
I was saying, right around 60.
You don't have to be spraying 24/7, and don't let it sit there in the wetness. It's really for hydration is the way that I look at it for like geckos and stuff. But the rhino rat snakes, like they don't know what the horn is about. That's exciting. And the fact that you have a snake that's arboreal and aquatic, you're like, what? Those are like, that's like saying something is like fossorial and arboreal. Like, no, that doesn't.
Right.
And they'll eat fish, but they'll also switch over pretty well after like a certain point to frozen pinkies and thawed. Don't feed it a frozen thawed pinkies. And they have that onogenic color change. They go from gray to green. They have a blue morph. I don't know if it's xanthic or whatever. They're in Europe and they're stupid expensive, but wow, they're relatively handleable. Tong feed. I mean, everything you would want from a pet, or something that is an amazing display. You can keep them in racks. You can keep them in like a nice planted 40. I'm obsessed. It's going to be part of my collection. And then the problem is, all right, that was an expensive snake, but if I get another one,
then you never eat it. I'm just saying.
And I feel
it has begun.
There's the whole incubator and all that. But once again, you probably incubate it near room temp, right? Just keep
basically, yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's kind of like the theme is like everything I keep is relatively tropical with like a couple exceptions. So like that's kind of what started me on the journey was like I read about crested geckos. I was always into insects, but my folks were kind of not on board with like a ton of tanks and heat lamps and all this stuff. I was like, oh, I can keep this at room temperature like year round. And then, you know, you kind of dip your toe into breeding. You're like, oh, this is pretty straightforward. Like for cresties, it's like rabbits.
Yeah.
It's like put them together and you'll probably see a lock like that night, you know, and then, I just like, there's some really amazing anoles. So I have the Blue Beauty anoles.
Oh, heck yeah.
If he wasn't, you know, possessed by Satan himself, I'd have him on my shoulder. Because I kept the night anoles, you know, like the $20, like you can just catch in Florida. They're from Cuba. Yeah. They're really pretty. They're underrated. I've had some of those I could handle pretty easily, especially if you raise them from a captive baby.
Mm-hmm.
And man, I got these Blue Beauties. I got one from like Reptile. I got one from someone else. And I was like, oh, I'm so excited. And I get this thing out of the box, like, mouth gaping, and it's lunging at me. And I'm like, man, I'm pretty sure I'm going to bleed tonight if I try to take this thing. But the colors, right? You come into the room and you're like, oh, that blue, that green, amazing. And that yellow. And then the eggs are like, you can basically incubate them at room temp. And I'm doing that successfully with the bearded anoles, the Cuban false chameleons.
Yeah.
Oh, heck yeah.
Incredible animals, which I found out last week will totally eat Pangea, which is the best thing.
Ah, that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Norman's Gecko Garage, he's like based out of Charlotte, is famous for saying, I don't think there's a lizard that won't at least take a nibble of Pangea. You know? And it's great because you're getting them extra calcium, extra nutrients, a little bit of sugar if you're trying to put weight back on like a female, because the anolis will lay themselves to death.
Yeah,
you really got to have like strong UVB, calcium like every time, and like I'll even go so far as to like when I'm spraying them with water because they're really like they like a lot of hydration, right?
Hydration is key, yeah.
Right, it's in the Bahamas, so they're getting tropical storms all the time. It's humid. There's pools of water. I'll slip in some liquid calcium because they lay one egg a month for like it's terrifying. I'm like, please stop laying. This is. I don't know. What do you guys for your female like snakes when they drop a clutch? I mean, you can see sometimes the snakes almost look like kinky, right? What do you do to put extra calcium back in them? Do you ever load a mouse with like extra calcium?
I have done that before, but I don't usually.
Yeah, it's interesting. The concept of supplementing for snakes is not a very popular point of conversation. I think largely because they're eating whole body prey items, you know, so they're breaking down bones and stuff like that. But I do know that there are some folks that have done it or do it fairly periodically, like just for that extra boost. But as far as like what kind of benefits, I just don't think there's a large enough sample size to be able to gather like some serious data on the potential benefits of it.
Yeah. And I've thought about that with the garters, right? So like I'm feeding them like earthworms, especially as babies. Like they're just, you know, you think about in the wild, right? A baby garter is like a sliver. They're real short.
Right.
So like realistically, are they able to catch minnows? Yeah, kinda. Are they catching? Heck no, definitely not. They're eating worms. They're eating occasionally insects too. So I think about like, okay, so he's eating worms. They do this in the wild, but how much like nutrition you're really getting from
a worm? Yeah.
Worm. So like, yeah, I'll wait until they take it, and I'll like sprinkle some calcium on there because that's the other thing that sucks as a reptile keeper. I have a lot of geckos and stuff, and like you need to feed them calcium for like the diversity of diet. But sometimes you put calcium on them, and they get a little finicky of like, what is this?
Yeah, this doesn't smell right. Yeah.
The real mistake is I also keep a lot of tarantulas. You can see there's like a bug collection going on over here. And sometimes I put too many crickets in the calcium cup and I have some left over and I'm like, oh, I got to feed the tarantulas tonight. Frick, they're all covered in calcium now. You know, I don't know if I want to like put those in there now.
Yeah. I've still done it sometimes. Not all the time, but I've still done it. Like YOLO, especially if it's like a bigger tarantula. I'm like, you're fine.
Wake up the next day, all of a sudden, your tarantula's got biceps. You're just like, wait, what the hell is going on, man?
It's not like a femur. You're like, why this tarantula's like rock solid?
Yeah, that's a lot of people thought that it'll give him DKS, and it's like, I don't know. Maybe not.
Yeah, I spilled a whole cup of calcium into my Bohemi, the Mexican like fire leg. That's an expensive adult female. I'm like, I don't know how to get this off of you now. You know, like, I want to take a blow dryer to a tarantula. Like, not one with like the painful
hairs. No, thank you.
I'm like, I hope you molt soon or figure that. I'm so sorry.
You'll figure it out. You're good.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's one thing. It's like I bought this house, with we were looking at houses for like a year and a half, and the market's been crazy. And I specifically bought this house because I could see like, okay, this has the potential to be a reptile room. Like, it's south facing windows. So I got free heat in the winter, and like it had the space that I needed. I needed a large room because I like to put stuff around the periphery as opposed to making like aisles.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll, someday as I expand or whatever, that'll be an option. But I'm always knocking stuff onto the carpet, and I'm like, this is the worst. Like, I need a solid wood floor for a reptile. If you ever spill Pangea on the carpet, you want to just curl up and die. It's the worst.
I've taken out scrubs and had them pee all over the carpet though, and
no,
really unfortunate.
No,
it's a lot of snake. That's a lot of pee.
Unfortunately, yes, it's so much. It is too much, I'll say.
Oh gosh.
But yeah, I thought Raleigh was it was like a medium show. Like, I ended up moving a lot of stuff, but the past few shows I've had a really hard time moving my own productions, right? Like, sometimes at the shows I'm selling stuff where, like, I don't know, I have like a buddy who produces Chihuahua, and I'll take a few at like a lower cost, and I'll keep the ones that I like, and I'll move some, or like maybe it's like a retired breeder or something like that. But like, I'm producing like super Dalmatian crested geckos, which has been like a long-term project of mine. And I'm producing lily whites and like hybrid gargoyles. And I find that like sometimes at these shows, it's a lot of people, and I say this with love and respect because you have to start somewhere, but it's almost like a petting zoo, that they're like, I had Gidgee skinks on the table. It was like a pair. And people are like, what are those? And like, I love, educating. But after like the 40th person, I'm like, okay, I'm losing my voice. I actually brought these here to sell them, not for you to be like, what's that pine cone looking thing?
Yeah.
I actually am trying to like move animals here. And so sometimes it can be a little frustrating, and it makes me kind of dial back the breeding, right? Like, I'm not producing cresties just to produce them or to wholesale them. I don't see the point. Right. So I'm like, I'm only producing what I would consider somewhat high end. Like the super Dalmatians, I'm not going to let one go for like less than like 200. And that's like cheap. Like, I've got some on the table that are $400 because they're like super high coverage, light base, what everyone's looking for. They're ready to breed. Yeah. And that's, I put in a lot of money for the breeders. They weren't cheap either to get a male and a female, both ink spot, heavy coverage. It's taken me a couple years to get them to breedable size and to pair them appropriately. And then I had to wait on the eggs. So that can be a little frustrating. Like, you'll sell one or two to people who know what they're looking for like true hobbyists. But then you also get a lot of people that are like, I'm going to buy a Cresty today, but only for $40.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay,
right.
Cool. And I
really hope you spent money on the setup.
Yeah. I have some of those on the table to help people for like a first time, but it's like, okay, I hope I sell this before I've put in $200 worth of Pangea, time, heat, electric, like if I get a gargoyle to an adult size, gargoyles for adults go from like $200 to $600 if it's not like high end. Mm-hmm. But like, if I get it to an adult, that took me 2.5 years. That's Pangea. I get paid by the hour at work. I'm not getting paid by the hour to feed geckos. Yeah, and I enjoy it to some degree, but it's really funny when people, they see my following or they see the reptile room and they're like, oh, you should do this full time. I'm like, no, I'd never pay my mortgage doing this. I would be like, yeah, no, it's not even remotely feasible for me, at least where I'm at. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are people like Flawless who have quit their day jobs, and like, I know people in the hobby that live in like Greensboro and this is their full time, but they also had to do like a huge investment, like of a lot of money, and it's risky and it's scary. It's just like opening a pet shop. It's like, okay, I'm putting all this down in the hope that this pays off. And so, for me, I'll say it like, it doesn't quite break even, but because I have some expensive animals every once in a while, but it's compared to like a boat, an expensive like a Honda Civic that you've like souped up or like whatever that is, it's not a money pit. It's like a money neutral. Like a lot of times, like my Sarah Sonorum is like a really rare New Caledonian gecko that a lot of people overlook or haven't heard of. I think they're pretty underrated. And I spent, like, I'm happy to say it, like I spent $700 for the pair like 3 or 4 years ago. And they've produced every year for me. And almost every year I make that back in. Yeah. And I'm just so thrilled to give someone like, people are like, oh, I'm bored of Cresties. I'm like, you've got to see this. Because 16 inches sometimes. I mean, they're almost as big as Tokays. And they get almost as chubby as a hamster. I mean, they just like love Pangea. And they do, it's the same care. It's like a double, it's 2 eggs per clutch and it's room temperature. Feed them Pangea. And so it's really cool to see. With the Sarahs, I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about. They're kind of like a bigger crested gecko without any crests.
I like the white collar ones, and then because there's so much variation depending on whether or not they have got the spots on them, and then how much there's connection and all that jazz. They're really cool geckos.
Yeah, super cool.
They have this like silly teddy bear pattern that goes down their tail. What's really interesting is in the US, we really like the thick white collar with like 6 spot, 8 spot, 12 spots. And that morph does exist in the wild, which is really interesting because when you look at like a Chihuahua, you're like, oh yeah, this blends. I mean, I have Chihuahua that when they're on the bark, I'm like, oh, did he get out? And then he's like right in front of me. And then you look at Sarah and you're like, okay, a 6-spotted animal and it's like bright white with like a black circle around the ring. Like, is this helpful in nature? But I pictures from like the original, like, founding keepers who imported the animals from New Caledonia, and they do exist. And then in the US, we really value those animals, and they'll go for like $1,200 if it's like a really nice one. In Europe, they love the patternless because for whatever reason, that's just not really what they got in. Where here, like I keep patternless and I keep white collar and I keep white spot. And to me, obviously the white spot is like the pinnacle, right? It's like a lily white. It's like a high white Chihuahua, which is really popular right now. It's just like, oh, this is so far from what the normal morph would be, And so when I produce a patternless, I'm like, man, that's a way cheaper animal. Or like, it's like cool. But in Europe, it's a total opposite. And I just find that so funny. Same with the rhino rat snakes too. Like they'll have some of the craziest old world stuff just because their importation laws. This is really true for like the insect breeding hobby. Europe will have all kinds of crazy bugs because they're technically land connected, right? To like Asia, Africa, parts of Europe.
Heard it's okay.
So I thought if you guys want, I'll run through the list of what I've currently bred, what I've had success breeding. And I think you guys will be pretty surprised at the breadth of what. So I've got Odura manilis, which is a so the Odura is like I've got a lot of Australian stuff. Yeah. Because the Australian geckos are incredible. They have leaf tails. If you want a leaf tail gecko that won't die on you and isn't, just so hard to keep alive and expensive. The Riverine, I'm also breeding the Salabronius, which are probably like one of my most like treasured geckos because they're almost as long. I'm so not kidding. They're almost as long as a paper towel roll. I mean, they're humongous, and they have these huge leafy tails that can regenerate. This year is a first for me, so I've bred Tokays finally. I'm not really sure why I'm doing it because they're so mean.
If you get babies and work with them, they can be super great. I've bred Tokays before, and they are awesome.
Yeah, and they're and once again, it's one of these animals where like out of the box, as they are in nature, that normal morph with that light blue and those red spots, and they're pretty food aggressive. Like I can tongue feed most of mine.
Yeah.
I have a couple of day geckos. I'm breeding Clemeri, which is like everyone's favorite, the neon day geckos.
Yep. Standing eye are my favorite.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, standing eye are a great one. I've bred those in the past. I actually just moved the rest of my breeders out. Grandis, I'm doing like high red Grandis. Sepadiana, which if you saw, I think I was posted on my story. They're the blue-tailed day gecko. And man, I can't believe more people aren't keeping those. Probably just because they're not like a Grandis. Like you just get them for like, I don't know, $5 at PetSmart. They're like they're rare. You'd have to meet someone who's like a breeder. But like, I don't know if the color is going to show up there. Probably not. It's like blasted out.
Right. That's
Oh,
a
there
cool.
you go.
Oh,
There we
there you
go.
go.
Yeah.
That's a pretty gecko.
That was taken today. So that's my male breeder. And then I'm breeding Cuban false chameleons. I'm breeding blue beauty anoles. I'm breeding all the racks. Like I even have a couple that nobody knows about. So there's you've seen Chihuahua before. There's a genus called the Bavaia. And I guess Bavia was some kind of explorer. And it's the same care, they stick to the walls, they eat the Pangea, they lay a couple eggs, and they're like a mini Chihuahua. And they're beautiful. I'm one of the only people. It's like me, Richie. There's like just a handful of people. And there's actually like 16 species of them. And I just keep the biggest one. Damn. But they're like a large mourning gecko. And I always have one on the table at expos. And people are like, what is that? Is that a giant mourning gecko? And I'm like, yeah, it's a mourning gecko. I gave it Tren. And like, look at this.
Oh, no.
So that's been a lot of fun. I'm also keeping those night lizards, the spotted.
Spotted night lizards are cool as hell.
Man, supposedly they eat Pangea, and that's kind of a common theme. Almost everything I keep will eat Pangea. That's just kind of what opened the gateway for me. I was like, man, it's so easy. I'm already making it. What's another deli cup? Or like what's another bread? I don't know if they eat it. They're so secretive. They're such an interesting lizard.
Yeah.
I know, Rob, it sounds like you know a little bit about them. Like you've heard that they have these surveys. I think we were talking about this at the show, but like they've done surveys where like year after year, the same lizard is under the same rock.
Yeah, same exact area. Yeah, they come and at certain times of year too. So certain times of year they'll be found here, and then certain times of year they'll be found here, and it follows the same trend year after year.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's like a wolf. Like it has such a strictly defined territory.
Yeah, and routine.
And then I also keep I keep a banded gecko, which is one of the U.S.
Coleonyx. Yeah,
it's a really high yellow, beautiful little thing, and it's super easy to care for. And people are captive breeding them, which is awesome. I have like 40 tarantulas. They're all New World because I am too much of a wuss to deal with.
See, I'm the opposite. All I've got is Old World stuff.
I'm too much of I've never had a tarantula get out, but I'm too much of a spaz sometimes with the gecko. Like I'm just way too worried. Like, oh man, if I leave this door open,
it's gone. Yeah,
gone. Yeah.
I love regalis. Oh my gosh, the Poecilotheria regalis with those yellow bands, and they're like 9 inches. They're always on the glass. Look at that nice tattoo. They're incredible. And I used to keep one, but I was just like, oh, it stresses me the heck out.
Yeah.
I'd like really gingerly like open the door to the Exoterra, like flick the cricket in there and shut it. Because they're so fast. They're faster than my brain can comprehend. Like a spider will just sit there all day. You think it's like a cactus. You're like, is this thing alive? And then as soon as it like feels the vibration, it teleports. Like I even have videos on my phone of me feeding, and like, man, it can't even capture the frame rate of the spider moving. It's nuts. And it's based on hydraulics.
Yes,
their legs are like basically like hydraulics, like it's a liquid system. It's bananas. And like I've bred a couple tarantulas, but I don't know, they're more just for me for fun.
Yeah I thought that Poecilotheria were fast until I kept true spiders, and then after that I was like, oh my god, I can see the tarantulas move. But with some of the true spider species like Viridaceus fasciatus and like some of the like huntsman things, they literally will teleport because they're here and I don't see them move, but then all of a sudden they're over here and I'm like, how did you get over there so fast?
Oof.
One of my greatest frustrations as a breeder was actually last year breeding huntsmen. I had this African species. They're like yellow and black. I'm spacing on the name because it's long.
Is it like a berry stylus or something?
Thank you for saving my life. Yeah, I was long and starts with a B. So I captive bred them, which is dope.
Ooh, that's
and
cool.
Then she laid a couple sacks and they hatched in situ. Like I didn't pull it or nothing because they glue them to the wall.
Yep.
Am I using that right? In situ? In tank.
Basically.
Yeah.
And man, they were big enough that I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. Like I'll get the fruit flies, and I'll raise them, and then I kind of was keeping them all communally for like a long time, even with the female, and it was like not a problem because they were like too small for her to like register as food. And then also with huntsmen, like they're amazing spiders, but once they start laying, you're kind of in the end zone, sort of like a mantis.
Yeah, they're gonna die. Yeah,
you're in the final 6 months. So I was kind of like, whatever. If I have to separate her, and they would just. I remember one day in particular moving them into individual containers, and I was like ready to pull my hair out. Because a lot of times what would happen is they move and I react, and then you'd accidentally squish them, or they just get out, and then I'm chasing them around the room, and like it was all fine. I always caught them all, but it was like I can't believe people do this for like a living. You know what I'm saying? Like this is also keeping me from going full time, because I'm like, and then it gets, once again, it's also like, okay, how much money am I going to put into cups, into doing this? And I still have the ones that I produced because I'm like, whatever, this was like a labor of love, and now I'm attached to them. But they also will turn cannibalistic. So at a certain point, I learned that it's like mantises too. I breed Rhombodera megara, which is this incredible giant Australian leaf mantis, and I've been doing it for like 4 or 5 years. And then every year I'll get like an outcrossed male from like another breeder, and I'll bring them in. And every year I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. I hate these fruit flies. They're getting all over my house. And I started like, even the cool thing is, and you guys moved from the Northeast. I moved from the Northwest. So like I'm born and raised Seattleite. And the cool thing about moving out here is like, wow, the weather is perfect. So like I'll actually keep them in the garage. So like, even though they're from Australia, I kind of cycle all my stuff. So like I tend to have baby mantises in the spring, and then they hit adulthood, or like I'll have egg sacs either hatch in like the early winter or like late fall. And so I'll just take them all into a tent and I'll put it in my garage, and they do great with the heat. And then when if the fruit flies go everywhere, I just turn on my blower and I just blow them off. So like that's really rewarding. And surprisingly, most of what I actually like make money on in this hobby actually is bugs. So I breed all these roaches, I breed the mantises, and a lot of times I'll wholesale mantises to like Asheville or other like invertebrate breeders. And I'm just like, thank God. I've got like 100 and I'm buying like massive quantities of like 32-ounce delis from like Josh's Frogs or whatever. And I'm like, oh, this is, and then once again, you're like dealing with it, like, come on, just get the lid on there. Just go. He's trying to escape. And, it's so frustrating. But then you get to the adult mantis phase and you're like, wow, this is a labor of love. I've spent 9 months raising you up, and they get this intelligence to them. Whereas you have like a baby mantis and you'll poke them and they'll jump. But when they get above a certain size, if you poke their leg, they'll turn around and be like, okay, are you food or a threat? And you're like, okay, there's almost like a decision making. Like I'm anthropomorphizing, but there's almost like an intelligence there, kind of like a jumping spider, where you feel like you're being watched, and it's not like fight or flight. There's like a middle ground of like, actually, no, I'm gonna keep an eye on you and see what you do, and then I'm gonna react. And that is like, that's what keeps me coming back. And it's similar with like the skinks. Like I love my geckos; they're easy. But then I have like Ergurnius, I have like the Gidgee skinks. No success breeding them, unfortunately. And then the Schneiders, I got a few fire skinks, and then of course I had to show those zebra skinks are the next big thing by far.
Skinks are cool, yeah.
Because any bug you throw at them, you can just pick them up. They don't need like super crazy heat. Like they do need heat, and you probably should do UVB, but they're live bearers, which is super fascinating because like half of all skinks lay eggs, and the other half are live bearers. And even within the same genus, some will be egg laying and some will be live bearers. And that'll
make no damn sense.
Well,
that's interesting.
A different genus, if I'm being honest.
It should, yeah.
Somebody messed up. And including
don't worry. There's a clumper somewhere that's going to get annihilated in the next 10 or 15 years.
And I used to keep the Rhacodactylus. It was Trachycephalus, which is the lesser rough-snouted.
It's not rough-snouted, yeah.
Yeah, and they're one of the only geckos in the world that gives live birth. They keep the egg internally, and then they pop out a baby.
I didn't realize that.
I sold him because, man, he was an expensive lone male, and like to get a female would have cost me It would have ended like $4,000 for the pair, and I just don't have that kind of money. And I didn't know if it was like a guaranteed thing, and you never know. Like, what if it has like a little gecko heart attack, and I'm just like out like a couple mortgage payments, but man, so cool. And then you're like, okay, well, how, it's on the same islands, right? So we're talking about like from an evolutionary perspective, really closely related. The care is exactly the same. It's the same islands. How did this become live bearing? Same with like Chihuahua and Cresty geckos can technically hybridize, and people do it. And even the hybrids are actually somewhat fertile. Would never encourage it, right? But it's like, okay, that's two different genuses, right? Like for Chihuahua, it's like miniature gecko Chihuahua. And for Crestids, it's like Rhacodactylus ciliaris, right? If they're in separate genuses, but they can hybridize, and not only can they hybridize, but the hybrids are also like semi-fertile back to the original parents, probably should all be one genus, right? That's just me. I'm not I'm only a microbiologist by training, but that just seems interesting that, it would be that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the carpet Woma hybrids. Like, how do you breed a python that has no labial heat pits to one that does and get offspring from that? That is and they're completely separate genus.
Yeah, it's a great point. I also wanted to ask you guys, since you guys are both transplants, right, from up north, being one myself, I know you talk about it on the podcast, and I've been a fan for a long time, but it's crazy to me how many shows there are in just the state of North Carolina, or my criteria is like a 4-hour drive.
That's usually what I'm,
So if you I come from Seattle, right? They had only two shows a year. And it wasn't even necessarily Repticon. It was like, they call it like PAC NRSW or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Great show. You can meet some great people. But okay, it's called the Seattle show. And it was an hour and a half away in Puyallup. Yep. And then the other show, which would happen like once a year, was in Monroe, which is an hour and a half north. It'd be like calling it Raleigh, but it's actually in Fayetteville. You're like, what?
Yeah.
Like or calling it Raleigh, but like putting it on the edge of Virginia. You're like, this isn't. And
this
actually, I would say
right.
Charlotte, if you've ever been to the Charlotte Repticon.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like
Concord. Yeah.
Like people ask, like, how could a Raleigh? Because to me, Raleigh is the best show in the state by far.
I would agree. Yeah.
Money wise, diversity wise. And people are like, how is that possible? Charlotte has like 4x the population of Raleigh. It's like, well, the Charlotte show is kind of on the out. You could live in Charlotte and drive almost an hour to get to Concord, which is like the arena. But so like, so like if you lived in Seattle proper and you were willing to drive an hour and a half, you would maybe have like 3 shows a year. And then you could extend to Portland. But that was it. You were totally out of luck. Not a lot of shows, not a lot of breeders. And then I come here, 4 shows in Raleigh per year, 4 shows in Charlotte, 4 shows in Asheville, a couple in Winston-Salem, a couple in Greenville, a couple in, they do have a Fayetteville one. And then they have the Show Me show in Durham 3 or 4 times a year. So we're talking almost 20 shows in just North Carolina, the state boundary. If you're willing to drive literally only 3 or 4 hours, you can tack on Myrtle, Greenville, South Carolina, Spartanburg, a couple of the Virginia shows, which are pretty good. You could maybe make it to like the edge of Tennessee. I mean, it's incredible. I did the math earlier this week in prep for this podcast. You could do, if you're willing to drive 4 hours or less, you could easily do 30 shows in 1 year. And people do it. People do it full time. I mean, you see them at the shows.
Yeah, I was going to say,
road warriors.
I met a lot of folks that are the road warriors that are like, oh yeah, next week I'm over here, and next week and the week after, and this I'm doing. Like when I first started vending shows out here, at like the end of every, where are we going to see you next? Like, what do you mean next? Like next month? And they're like, no, like next week. Where are you going to be next week? And I'm like, home.
At home.
Fucking TV. Like, what do you mean I got to go to another show? But yeah, it's crazy. I mean, like for us in the Northeast, it's like, we had the Mass show that was a couple times a year. It was, small show, a couple of different shows in New York, but the main one was like White Plains. Then there's the New Hampshire show and maybe a couple of other little ones here and there. And if you want to drive a little further, if we're, because we're both from Mass, then you could go into PA There's a couple of PA shows if you want to take like that 4, maybe 5
That
hour
was
drive or
7 hours for me.
Oof. Yeah. But like, so we had maybe I would say like a good 12 or maybe 15 shows over the course of the year regionally. But dude, coming down here is like
almost every weekend.
Next level. Yeah, like the Southeast region is just so swamped with shows. It's crazy.
It's nuts. And you don't have them overlap, right? Like Raleigh Repticon drives me nuts sometimes. The same with Charlotte. Because for me, I'm a small breeder, right? I mean, I say that humbly. Like, I'm not doing this full time. I'm not a road warrior. If it's more than 2 hours, I'm probably not going to do the show unless I'm already coming out that way. Like, I don't go to Tinley often. I've never been. I'm really excited to hopefully go for the first time in the next like year or so. So when I do a show, it's like Raleigh in particular, it's always on top of Tinley. So you have certain breeders, you're like, oh, I was so excited to see you at Raleigh, but now you're getting pulled up north. And like, if Charlotte Repticon is on the 30th of June, there's also a show me show in Durham on the same day. So like, oh man, everyone who's kind of like this far and over would probably go to Durham. Or if they think that Charlotte or whichever one is more money for them, they're going to go there. So that's always like interesting. And then same with like Raleigh always does it on Memorial Day, which is kind of fun for me because then it's like I can do show cleanup Sunday night, sleep in, recover the next day.
Fair, yeah.
But also, if I ever want to do a camping trip, I'm like, oh, I'm missing one of the best shows of the year. And it's in my hometown. It's like a 25-minute drive. You know, it's like, how can I skip this? Right. So, you know, it's a weird balance. And then there's also, I know people have talked about like show fatigue too, where it's like, okay, if we have a show every week, you know, but there's also drought.
The burnout.
I like a one show a month, right? In the Raleigh, Charlotte area. I feel like it's perfect. Like if you want it, it's there, but you're going to have to, you have to work for it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I liked the like being again from the up north scene, like, you know, White Plains was what 4 times a year, 3 or 4 times a year, Rob, and like I felt like that was ideal. And I think like a lot of the major shows, like Raleigh is 4 times a year, Charlotte's 4 times a year. Like I feel like there's a decent enough distance between like a Charlotte and Raleigh where it's like, you know, if I know it's gonna come up 4 times this year, I'm gonna save up my money, you know, and drive 30 minutes versus 2.5 hours. You know, I might see the same vendors, you know, unless there's somebody / some animal that I know I'm only going to see or get over there, you know, I'll just hold tight. And like, that was like a big thing with the scene up north was like, you know, White Plains was the big show, you know, unless you wanted venomous, then you go to Hamburg, but, you know, so people would save their money. It's where they restocked their freezer. It's where they, you know, they came to see certain breeders with certain things, you know, like that was the show. And I feel like there's such a flood of shows here. It's really hit or miss.
Yeah.
You know, like at a White Plains show, you could pretty much say like, if I've got the right stuff on my table, you know, like I'm going to make some money. And you know, be it my clientele is high end, you know, very niche high end stuff, or like pet quality stuff, or like, you know, entry level stuff, you're gonna make some money. Here it's literally 50-50. You know, like I've had shows where it's like, cool, I'm walking away from the weekend with 5 figures. And I've had other shows where I'm like, I made like $200. Like, what the hell is going on? You know, and like that stark difference just within the state, because like I'm personally not traveling out of state to vend shows. Like there's plenty happening here where like don't need to, you know, but that's something that's like every show is a gamble, you know, in that regard, especially when you work with really common species. Like, you know, like I've got bloods and Amazons and stuff like that, but like I breed a lot of ball pythons. You know, I've got a lot of geckos. I've got a lot of colubrids, like not necessarily crazy rare stuff, but, you know, with the colubrids, it's like, there might be like 3 or 4 other guys that have this stuff. But, you know, ball pythons is like, well, that's half the show, you know, so how am I going to make money on that? I don't know. You know, it's always that weird toss up. So I think it's cool for those that are making the living, being the road warrior. It's like, hey, if you really love these animals and this is what you're passionate about and you're able to make a living, you know, I know a couple folks that, like a husband and wife team, and on those overlapping show dates, one of them will go to one show and the other will go to the other show, and they monopolize. And I'm like, if you've got the inventory and the ability to do something like that, good for you. Like, don't miss a friggin' beat. But for me, holy Christ. Like,
right. Especially too, if you have a full-time job, right? Like, I work from home, so it's cool. I'm always like, I'm near my reptiles or like whatever. Like, I love being home with them. I honestly could not do this if I had to leave. Like, I wouldn't feel comfortable having all of these electrical outlets like maxed out and running all day. And like, when it gets really hot in the summer, like even now, I'll turn off all the lights at 2.
Yeah.
Like, you had all morning to mask. You had all morning to get your UVB. You're good now. It's 8. And I let the upstairs where the reptile room is, like, I let it get up to 77. It's totally fine with me, or 80 degrees. And then once it gets 80, I'm like, all right, we're
everything's
chilling.
off. Yeah.
And then we're doing the night drop, right? But
yeah,
the road warriors, but like, so like I'm working like full time, right? And it's a lot of work. And then I don't have a ton of free time. And with the size of my collection, it's definitely like hours every week. You don't have to feed Pangea 2 or 3 times a week. And that's about like a 3 or 4 hour trip, like doing all the, because I got like a ton of babies. I'm doing all kinds of crazy stuff with like fraps and caps and lilies and Dalmatians and all the other species. And I'm collecting eggs, at least once a month through like all the lay boxes and everything. And then I have all my weird one-offs. So I'm like collecting, it's like, it's a ton of time. And there's no way I could do this and do like, home. And then you can go be gone on the 2 days you get to recover from the week. Shout out to them, because that is not something I could do. That would turn it into work for me, and I don't think I'd enjoy it.
Yeah, like that's, and I think for a lot of folks, like that's also something that they don't take into consideration if they decide to maybe want to pursue this or give it a shot. Is like, maintaining the animals, the breeder animals, is kind of one thing, and maybe you get into that rhythm, where it's like, okay, well, I know I can get everything done in X amount of time and whatever. But then when all those babies start hatching and your workload doubles or triples, suddenly you're like, Robert, are you triggered? But like, I mean, that's something that I feel every season. Like I'm somebody who also has like a large amount of species, that I'm working with all the time. So it's like, I've got my fall winter breeders and my spring breeders. So I get 2 waves of insanity every year, and it's like, people are like, how do you do it? And I'm like, I don't know, man, but that crack's looking really good right about now. Like, we gotta make this work, dude. It's crazy, man.
Brumation is a really hot topic right now, even among geckos, right? Australian animals, skinks, snakes, turtles, almost everything, actually. Even stuff that we would consider somewhat tropical, right? So like bearded dragons, people talk about brumating them for breeding. Australia does have a winter. And then, my buddy Aaron said the other day, he's like, it was winter. I say the other day, it was months ago. He's like, this is the best time of the year. I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't see any of my animals. They're all like down for the winter. I hate this. He's like, no, dude, think about it. You don't have to feed them. You've got a lot more free time. This is a lot less electricity, lower lights. You decrease the light cycle, decrease the heat, decrease the food cost. He's like, this is the best time of the year. I'm like, bro, maybe you don't even want to keep reptiles.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I like to see them, but he's totally right. Like and for me, the advantage in the summer is like, I don't need so much heat. Like, honestly, there's so many animals that like, I'm captive breeding flying geckos, the Phytocuzon, Cooley,
yeah.
Butchered that name, but whatever, it's Latin. I raised them without heat, and they do so well. They do so well. They won't breed without heat. That's a big thing. It's like, you do have to give the adults heat, because the females will kind of cook the egg, if that makes sense. Like, she'll go to her spot, and there's something about them. And snakes do this too, right? Like, they will thermoregulate as needed when making eggs, but they raise them without heat. And the room is like nearly 80 every day. Same with like my Pac-Man frogs and like all kinds of random stuff. The fire skinks, I take away their heat in the summer. They do great. They don't need it at all. They're still digesting. I'm watching the bowel movements, right? It's normal. I'm not seeing anything that's causing me concern. They're not losing weight. It's totally fine. So yeah, it's like playing with the seasons, right? It's hot here. So like I've definitely toyed with like, okay, I've got like an Indonesian blue tongue skink that would love the heat and humidity.
Mhm.
Kind of my next project is to maybe make an outdoor setup the way that like, you know, what is his name?
Ron
Rob?
St. Pierre.
Oh yeah, Ron St. Pierre.
Yeah, the way that he does their stuff. And Heather, yeah, super cool. So I love it, man. It's so
That'd be
great
tight.
to be here and be surrounded by so many people. Like you guys are here. Well, I mean, we've already name dropped so many big breeders. Sundown Reptiles too is another incredible one out of Asheville, just changing the game for like Chihuahua, tree monitors, all kinds of like random stuff. I love the people who have diversity. Like if you go to my table at any given show, you will you'll see over 20 species on my table. And same with like the shores. I think you were alluding to them earlier, like Paul and Lindsay.
Yeah.
You know, there's a few people that really specialize in like, hey, I got a little bit of everything, but everything here would make a great captive. Like you're gonna enjoy this species. And at the end of the day, that's what it's about, is enjoying it. Like I've thought too about like, okay, even if I did make enough money to do this full time, would I hate it if it became work? You know what I'm saying? Like if I worry that it would take the fun out of it, especially being kind of like an ADHD neurodivergent person. It's like as soon as I have to do something, I'm like, this is not as fun as it was.
It takes the fun right out of it, man.
Yeah,
in my opinion,
it definitely does. It
But
definitely does.
it's a hobby, right? It's like 9 to 5. I'm grinding at work, and I'm doing that, and then I come home and I'm like, this is what I like. This is why I go to work. This is what I like make money for. It's for these moments. It's playing with these animals. My wife is so funny too. She's like, you've done the gecko room in 2 hours before. Why does it always take you 4? And I'm like, because I'm looking at them. I'm playing with them.
hanging out with them.
Pictures, I'm tongue feeding them. It's like, it's so rewarding.
Yeah. It's definitely it definitely does take an element of the fun away, having to do things full time, because there's that extra pressure.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Where it's like, and like we've talked about this before on the podcast, and like even we've had guys like Ozzy Boyd's on, like we had like really dove deep into the business topic discussion, and like a lot of people don't take into consideration, they're like, people forget like, oh, that means I don't have a 9 to 5, so that 30, 40, 50 grand a year or more that you're making is suddenly gone. That's off the table. Which means whatever that paycheck would normally look like for you, if you're not making that from your shows or your Morph Market sales or whatever, you've got nothing. So, and you have to take into account the expense to run the business, so it's like, if you make 50 grand a year and you're living, comfortably, I won't say that you're making a crap ton of money, but like you can pay your bills, everything's cool, you got a little money that you're able to put away in savings and whatever, but then it also costs you, let's say 10 to 15% of your income to maintain your business. So now you're looking at an extra 5 to 10, maybe 15 grand a year just to run your business. So now you need to guarantee yourself that you can make 60, 65, 70 grand a year to maintain that life cycle. Plus now you have to pay for your own insurance. You have to do all these other things, pay self-employment taxes and all these other things that you didn't have to do when it was just the hobby.
Right.
And all of that pressure is on you. All of that pressure is now on your animals. All of that pressure is on the market. And when sales don't go well, like those bills are still coming in, and depending on what you're breeding, if it's something like new cow stuff where like a lot of it's like Pangea based or whatever, like you can probably skirt away and it won't really damage you too much. But if it's somebody breeding a boa species or python species where it's like, hey, it costs me $2 to $4 every week to feed each snake.
Dang,
each snake. No, it's true, man. It's true. So it's like, even if, let's say you're getting a great deal on rodents, your expense, let's say just on the off season, your expense for breeders is X amount. Now, all of a sudden you've got 4 times that amount of babies that are now costing you more money, so it takes you that much longer to know your expenses, and every year is going to fluctuate. Just because you produced 100 babies last year doesn't mean you're going to only produce 100 next year. Maybe you produce more, maybe you produce a little less.
Right.
So it takes some time to understand that kind of graph
Cycle,
of what your income looks like and your expenses and all those things. So it 100%, coming from experience, takes a bit of the fun away when you're pretty much solely reliant on the sale of your offspring.
I try to like take, and like, Rob, I'm sure you do this too, and Jeremy, but like I try to take like a mental stock of my like happiness level and enjoyment. And some of the times that I'm the most frustrated is when I'm like dealing, unfortunately, with the public, right? It's like you'll post to like local groups, like Facebook groups. There's a ton of them specific to NC and South Carolina. And you'll just have people be like, hey, I saw you posted this lychee. And, you know, I just was curious if you would trade for like a male crested gecko. And you're like, first of all, I've got way too many male crested geckos. And then secondly, like, you might be ignorant or just don't have the funds, but actually, like, what you're saying to me is incredibly insulting. Because it's kind of like if you sold bikes for a living and you made the bikes and someone's like, hey, I'll trade you your really nice Schwinn, which is worth like $2,000 for a bike seat. And you're like, first of all, that's not even a whole bike.
Yeah.
Like, your offering is so much less than. And also, I'm really trying to get rid of bikes right now. I don't want more bike materials. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and it happens a lot. And I, you know, sometimes it depends on my mood, but like sometimes it really bothers me of like, man, like that's so, you have no idea. And like, I've had people do that too. Like, oh, can I trade like a male for a female? I'm like, you either know exactly what you're doing or you have no
piece of shit. Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't everyone be doing that? Oh yeah, I'll trade you males for females all day.
All day, yeah.
All day. Like, yeah. And so like sometimes that's when I really take a hit sometimes, and I have to kind of take a step back of like, look, the cool thing is like I do sales for a living too. It's kind of funny. So on the clock, if you waste my time, I'm still getting paid my salary.
Yeah,
exactly.
I'm paying electricity. I'm putting, you know, rodents and crickets on the table. But if you waste my free time, that's when I get a little bit upset because I'd rather spend that with my wife, with my friends, talking to reptile people, going to pool, swimming, running, herping. You know, because that's the other thing too, is I really respect the heck out of you guys. You not only keep, but you also herp. Like there's a lot of people where that actually becomes weirdly siloed, where herpers
they only do one or they only do the other.
Yeah, there's like this really like this weird hierarchy. I'm like, no, like of course if you love something in nature and it would make a good captive, why wouldn't you want that little? I mean, did I not make a terrarium like in my own house? Like there's all these like plants behind me.
Right.
Yeah, I love it. And if days where I have to be in the house, I feel like I still got outdoors. I was in the room.
Right. No, I still saw some green today. It's okay.
And the herbs here are incredible. I used to live almost near downtown Fuquay. Rob, you know Daddy D's like barbecue. I was like good Lord. I was like half a mile down Judd Parkway. And I just like keeping stock of my own yard, you know, which was near like a major road. I would see like pickerel frogs, bullfrogs, tree frogs, decays, snakes in my backyard, or I don't know how you say that. Decays. I'd see all kinds of incredible insects. I started planting milkweed to try to get the monarchs to hold over. And it was so cool. Immediately I started seeing milkweed bugs, which wouldn't have been in my yard, you know, but there's like all this diversity. Without even trying, I'd see gnolls all the way into like December. They would like hide under just to see that in my own yard. It's one of my favorite things about living here. I love Washington. I go back every year. It's beautiful. But their diversity was so low because it's so strongly Doug fir, which is acidic and not much has evolved to eat it. So like we have very low bug diversity, which in turn means very low like lizard and herb diversity. And then the cold temperatures obviously also limit what can survive there, right? And what's really crazy, we're talking about oviparous versus like viviparous. The northern alligator lizards compared to the southern alligator lizards are live bearing because the eggs wouldn't have enough time to like properly heat up.
Right.
It's crazy. But yeah, I can't say enough. Like I live next to a nature trail now, and every day I'm on my run and I'm seeing like a snapping turtle in a creek. I'm seeing like red-shouldered hawks, all kinds of
Yeah.
broad-headed skinks have really caught my attention.
Yes, heck yeah.
Huge and like, oh, it's crazy. The only thing I hate are the laws sometimes. So it's like, you can only have 5 a year and then you get a permit. I'm like, I'd really like to breed Eastern Garters. And now if I want to do that, it's like, I better do the paperwork before they give birth because I'm going to have way more than 5.
Yep.
So, but yeah, it's so cool. Sometimes the laws really confuse me, right? So it's like, nah, you can only have 5. I'm like, okay, but if I had an outdoor cat, she's going to kill
as many as it wants. Yeah.
Yeah, like birds, rodents, turtles, frogs, lizards, snakes.
Yep.
You know, or what if I was just like a dude who kills snakes for fun? And there's a ton of them out here and I hate it. And like I kill like 100 of those. I'm like, so he can kill 100, but I can't keep more than 5? What? Like, hold up. But I play by the rules. Like I have a box turtle, which I would never recommend to anyone to take out of the wild, but this one was hit by a mower and was deemed unreleasable. So I actually adopted it from an animal rescue. I told them I have the extra space, and they're really personable. They're incredible little turtles.
Yeah,
like,
super cool. Yeah,
they have an intelligence. You know, that's my favorite part of any lizard or reptile. If they know that I mean food, I mean, come on, it's so cute when they. You know what it's like when a feeding night with the snakes too, and they're all up on the glass. You're like, you get an extra one.
Yeah,
you're so good.
It's cool. It's cool until you open the enclosure and they're launching themselves at you.
Yeah, my friend I actually helped my friend move a large part of his snake collection. And I don't have any experience with ball pythons. And I saw he was at the front. He was pretty curious. And I know what that means with snakes. It means do not dangle your hand in front of them.
Yeah.
Your face in front of them. And I opened it purposely kind of like, and it was all mouth, just raw.
Yep.
All right, we're done. Luckily, I was able to like bop it back in there. Like I had like tongs or whatever, and I was kind of just like, all right, you're done. I didn't have any mice. Like the thing just hadn't been fed in a while.
Yeah. Oh man, I know. I was feeding the Borneos today, and one of my monster super striped girls, as soon as I opened the enclosure, was just,
How often do you guys get tagged by your snakes? Like weekly, monthly, yearly?
I got nailed today by a ball python, but honestly, not very frequently. I get, oddly enough, I get nailed by young colubrids more than anything else, because it's just that initial like food, and they just go for it, and they're like, oh wait, no, I lied. So yeah, I'd say maybe maybe a couple times every quarter.
Yeah. You ever keep any snakes? They think that they are the food. They're like, this smells like a snake, and it's like, yeah, idiot, it's you.
It's you.
They'll bite. Like MBK.
The ridiculous cow kings, bro. Just they're like food, grab themselves, and they just sit there and try to wrap themselves up. And I'm like, you don't feel that. Like there's always that question for me when a snake bites itself and holds on. Like retics are the same way.
Oh yeah.
You don't feel that? Like I know that hurts. So you're telling me your prey drive supersedes all pain receptors?
Yeah.
Like, oh man, it's struggling really hard. It's biting me back. And you're like, fucking idiot, man.
It's like a feedback loop. Yeah. It's like doubling down. But they're so hard not to fall in love with North American snakes. Sometimes they get, obviously that's like, it's easy to take advantage of them because like, oh, they're there, right? Oh, it's a native black. I can go see that in my yard. But you have things like rosy boas, rubber boas, and they're just like the live bearers. They've got a good disposition. They eat almost every time. I mean, wow. And then like, God forbid the power goes out. They can handle high heat or low, if in the winter, all right, they're just going to go into a state of like mini brumation. Like, we get hurricanes here. I always worry about it. My next big investment is going to be a generator because of the reptiles. Like I need to keep it lower than 85 for the new cows, but higher than probably 45 also for the new cows and for anything else. But man, you ever look into like a one-time generator is one thing, but you ever look into like the Generacs and they're like,
between 5 and 12 grand.
They're about 5, and then it's the labor is like another $7,000 to install them. I'm like, man, I just so don't have that kind of money. I want one real bad. But I even like I'm thinking about getting a backup portable AC unit just in case my big ones, like the house ones, ever fail. Just because I do have the new cows cannot go over 90 for long; they will spaz out, and so that makes me nervous when it's 96 every day here for 2 months, and my AC is constantly, it's like cranking up.
True.
Stresses me out a little bit, but then I don't worry about that with my snakes. I'm like, okay, you will be fine.
Yeah.
Until I get it fixed. You've got right. 90 is a little, they're sitting at 96 is not ideal. Just make a little pen, put them in the yard, give them some cover.
Yeah, right. There you go. Yeah, here's a leaf. Figure it out.
But it's one of the things too I like about the hobby is that challenge of like, okay, how do I dial in temperatures better? How do I become more efficient cost-wise every year? Right? Like, I'm not a big fan of tubs. I never have been. I don't like the way that they look. So like I have a huge 4x2x2 right here for some Sudan plated lizards. But the tubs at Walmart, oh my gosh, you can get a 50-gallon for like $40. Compare that to a heavy glass. And same with like sometimes lately I've been breeding wild caught animals, right? Like emerald tree skinks are incredible. I love them. They're exactly rated. Like you watch those videos, they're just like that most of the time. Super inquisitive, but I'm dealing with wild caught, so I'd rather not take a nice glass tank because if anything dies or whatever, like cleaning that's gonna be abysmal. I'd rather use like a tub. And same with some of the larger skinks or like the box turtle. Massive tub, and it gives me so much glee. I'm like hauling this thing to my car and like because you can actually lift them. If I move a 40-gallon, a 50-gallon glass tank, I need help. Like I can do it, but I'm gonna throw my back out. And your partner is. I mean, I think it's maybe different for Rob since I think your lady's pretty into reptiles, but like my wife does not want to be moving tanks all the time. She's like, okay, we're done now, right? Or like building like a baker's rack. You need people to like shimmy it down the poles.
Yeah.
You need like a hammer and like and I get it. It's not fun. And like bless her, she's helped me build like the whole room. But yeah, it's it's just different little things. Same with like pinkies. I found certain animals love them. And I'm like, this is expensive, but if it puts weight on my female again, like some of the skinks, it's a phenomenal way to get weight back on them. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it for the health of the animal. Right. And I've learned the hard way that like tokays need UVB. You can keep a male tokay without it. It's totally fine. Females will calcium crash. They will die. I hate that I learned it the hard way and you never thought that they would. And then she just went downhill. And it's because those eggs are very calcified.
Yeah.
And then I talked to people who are smarter than me or have been doing it longer, like Jimmy Ma from Gecko and Gecko.
Oh, he's great, man.
He's awesome. He's like, look, man, I had the same issue as you. I've got like 30 breeding groups. And until I started doing UVB, I'd lose females. I'm like, really? But they're nocturnal. He's like, it doesn't matter. They need. And then he was like, super supplement calcium. Go nuts. Like they don't have calcium.
Leave a dish of it in there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's like, there's like things sometimes you have to learn the hard way. Same with the flying gecko. I just lost a female. She was a long-term care wild caught. Those are pretty calcified eggs. If you're not doing UVB and like a ton of calcium, then that's not in a care guide, right? You go to like reptiles.com, you can read dubia.com. Like a lot of places won't, and I like Dubia. They really go the extra mile on their care sheets, but like you won't always see these things unless you listen to people who are smarter, listen to a podcast, live that hobby. So it's cool to see how far I've come. I'm breeding more species than ever before. Pray for me. It's too much. I'm drowning in babies. I'm the only people that breeds Blazodactylus, which is like the Madagascar velvet geckos.
Ooh.
I cannot sell them.
Heck yeah.
I cannot sell them to save my life. Like no one is interested because they'll get imported from time to time, right? So they're cheap. But like Madagascar is not going to allow us to export the way that we do forever, or they're going to burn the whole place up for like crop farming, and then we won't have them to take. Right. So, but it's so funny. Like they eat Pangea, they're phenomenal, almost room temp. I cannot sell these things for the life of me. I have a ton of them. They're super cool. I love them. They're really fun, but they'll be with me till I die. I'll have 100 of them. Some kid will be like, hey, does anyone keep Blazodactylus? I'm like, where were you?
Yeah.
They'll have their moment as soon as you get rid of the group. You're like, you know what? I'm done with these. And then some influencer's going to be like, look at the silly eyes on these things. And then everyone's like, I need them. Take my money.
Yeah, Clint's
Yeah.
Reptiles or someone will do a video.
That's what you got to do. You got to send a pair to Clint.
Dude,
like just send a pair to him and just be like, dude, do a video.
Do a video.
Like, I'll give these to you for free. Just do a video. And
yeah,
I bet you he'd do it too.
I bet it would work. And it seems like a lot of effort. I'm not going to do it. Gosh, there's so many great people that are making content too. I've learned a ton from those people. Clint in particular shows me, oh, that would make a great pet. Do I got space? Maybe.
Yeah.
Right. I think I can get one more cage in there. Yeah.
That's another time. Do people ever ask you guys, how many reptiles do you have? I hate that question.
Like, I don't know, 100.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm like, it's in the triple digits, bro. Like,
it's a whole, I just tell people, it's a whole room, floor to ceiling.
there you
Whatever
go.
you're imagining, it's worse.
Yeah, whatever you're imagining, it's more.
Yeah. Yeah, you cannot fathom.
Are you guys going to do the Charlotte show at the end of June?
I won't be there. I will be away playing a couple concerts
Nice.
that weekend. Which I'm kind of bummed about because somebody offered me their tables because they can't do the show, and I was like, oh, but guaranteed money is better than guessing money.
Oh yeah. I mean, what you said earlier was dead on. Shows are so hit and miss. Is that your full-time job, doing like music?
So it's honestly it's pretty split for me between reptiles and music. Both of those things pay the bills. So, which I'm very, very thankful for.
That's pretty cool to do both of your like extreme passions. That's awesome.
It's awesome and incredibly stressful, and I do not recommend it for the faint of heart.
It can be hard to be creative, like on the clock.
That's one thing that, like, especially in recent years, I have struggled more with my own personal artistry because so much of my creativity gets tapped because I do a lot of recording for other artists. Yeah. So, and a lot of times in those instances, I'm also writing those parts. So like a lot of my creativity just gets tapped for that. So by the time I'm able to sit down and try to do something for me, I'm just kind of hit this writer's block, or I'm having to take my free time and just practice for the next gig. So I don't get a whole lot of time to really sit and be like, oh, I hear this funny chord progression in my head. I want to see what I can make out of it and then make some song that could make me millions of dollars. I don't really get many of those moments these days. Like a lot of the music that I've released in the last year is stuff that I wrote 4 or more years ago. That I just kind of sat on and was like, all right, I think it's time, like I think it's time we let this out into the public.
Yeah.
So I get a good creative streak. Like I'd say once every 6 months, I'll get a really good creative streak where I can sit down and like write some things or at least come up with a bunch of ideas and then revisit later throughout the year and be like, all right, now we can mess with something like that. But yeah, a lot of my time and effort gets, put onto other people. Like I just got a contract to work on an album. It's like 8 or 9 songs and I have to write all the horns for that, and I'm like, cool. I'm super thankful for the opportunity, but it's also just like, yeah, damn.
It's a struggle. I've ruined myself where like all I want to do is reptiles. So like I'm just living for retirement because once I'm like, fixed income, right? Once you got like it all taken care of and the house is paid off and like you're like, okay, I'm just gonna live on like $30K a year, like whatever it is, plus reptile food. I could just be a little farmer up here and like whatever I make, like what I make, And I'm like, dude, I can't be thinking about retirement. Like we haven't even had kids yet. I'm like just turned 30. Like I've got like 30 more years of like, it's terrible, but it's that just means you're that passionate, right? If that's like all you think about, if that's like all you want to do. And I love the way that like you guys get after it and you're such like positive influences. Like I've been a fan for a long time. I love Rob's Instagram stories. I live for those, the Pokemon and like the random herps you find like on the job. Oh, I love it. You know, I still haven't found a copperhead out here. Isn't that pathetic? Isn't that pathetic?
Oh man.
I'm like, what am I doing wrong? I go out all the time. Like,
you got to take a day and job shadow Rob. Just be
We
like
have to
right
do
along.
that. Literally, I will take you to. There's like 2 or 3 places I go where, if we go there, we'll see a copperhead, and we can
found
do that.
And I'm like, I'm living in the South, right? Like, I know they're here.
Mm-hmm.
My neighbor's like, oh, I saw one. Like, you did not, because I've
No. No.
Dang.
That's sad. That's so sad.
Wait, how far away are you from Durham?
I work in Durham a couple times a week.
Oh, wow.
But I am in the Holly Springs area, south of
Okay. That's where my job is, so I'm down there every day.
Hey.
But
Which means there's definitely copperheads, you just haven't seen them.
Oh, for sure. I know there. Jordan Lake must be full of them.
I was just gonna say Jordan Lake is where I've been spending a lot of time recently, and maybe we should meet up and do some road cruising or something.
I'm so down. Yeah, for sure. And that's the other thing. The herping community is crazy good here too. I have a lot of friends that like Thomas and other people do like moth watching. You know,
Thomas is the shit, man.
He's incredible. What an incredible person. Yeah, I meet a lot of people here from like the Turtle team and like NC State, and they're so passionate. And they're just like, you look at their social media, it's just all positivity. Yep. It's just all like helping people out, education, conservation. I offer that everywhere I move. Like in my neighborhood, I'm on the local Facebook. I'm like, hey, if you have a snake, please send me a text. I'll be right over. Don't kill it. Because I hate seeing those posts of like, hey, here's this headless snake. First of all, what's its ID? And I always comment, well, it would be a lot easier.
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
Like, you're making my job real hard. And then second, it's like, just call me. I'll bring a bucket. I'll get it out of here. Don't worry about it. Yeah, and I've already done it for my neighbors. Dude, I thought it was a corn snake. Those black rats as babies look like identical corns. Yep. It's crazy.
Yep, little anery corns.
Yeah. I don't know how long this goes, too. So please feel free to stop me if I'm like, I don't know how long like you were thinking of going tonight.
Oh yeah, we usually hit an hour, but we've been hanging and vibing, so it's been cool. But that being said, I think we will round it out because I also know I have to be up at the crack of dawn because I got to get to Atlanta for a show tomorrow. But heck yeah! So before we do end it out, we always ask our guests a final question. And that question is, what in the realm of reptiles, be it something in your collection, something you've seen online, anything like that, what in the realm of reptiles has you excited about reptiles?
Oh, such a great question. I love that. I love a new species. The Calotes, the forest dragon.
Yes.
Yeah.
So long. Anyone who's done any research, and you'll see them at shows, but you just know they need a lot of water. They need running water. You're doomed. They got parasites. They stress. You can't them. And then a couple people, like I think Eddie Soto and like Christian Larson up in Virginia. I mean, he's local. He came to a show me show and I bought one. And they change color. And they actually, at least the ones that he's got, like he did the legwork, like they're durable. They're somewhat handleable. They're somewhat tongue feedable. Like all the hallmarks of like a decent pet, you can leave for like a day or two and they won't die on you. That really kind of reignited, some excitement for me of like, oh, if these are viable, then like this whole other family of lizards like might also become viable. That and I cannot say enough. Mike Curtin, rhino rat snakes.
Oh yeah.
Love
Mike, man.
Animals. He's a great guy. I'm almost certainly they're incredible and just perfect display. Yeah, I did it incredible. So like both of those, they're beautiful. They're easy, really, really easy to take care of. Really gets me going. So excited.
Hell, didn't Ty Park just get some eggs from Calotes?
There's quite a few people now that are working. I could name 5 that are working. I follow all of them.
Yeah. I think I just saw something about that. They're definitely a super cool lizard for sure.
Yeah. There's a few, but yeah. And then Frank Payne is always throwing new stuff in my face. I'm like, oh, dang it, man. Actually, I just got one I've wanted for like 7 years, and it's the Sri Lankan little horned lizards, the Dumbara. Incredible. Room temp, maybe UVB. I give mine UVB. It's probably a good idea. Live bearing. Easy to handle. They're like a Urodactyloides, but no Pangea. Tongue feedable, small. They're phenomenal. And they do great in the vivarium. Plant it up. You got it.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool as hell.
And I
Dude,
bought
that
one.
is freaking awesome.
I love supporting other breeders. When I was younger and starting out, I would really haggle with people, and I was kind of a cheapo. And now I'm like, I know what you put into this. It's worth what you're asking. So that's also been a fun discovery. Just means you have to budget longer.
True.
True.
Yeah, you guys are awesome. Thanks for having me on. Been a long time listener, and it's cool you guys are local, so I get to see
Hell
you guys.
yeah.
Heck yeah, man.
Dude, for real. And we got to go herping because I'll put you on a copperhead. I'm sure we can figure one out. So
It's embarrassing, man. I don't even have my C card.
It took me a long time to find my first copperhead when I came down here, so I don't blame you. I don't know if it took me. I know it took me longer than 6 months to find my first
There
copperhead.
we go.
So, and then after that, it was very sporadic. It was not like I found them all the time, but
Yeah.
more recently, I've been better about finding them. So, for the people at home who want to follow you and see the things that you're doing, where should they look you up?
Yeah, thanks. The biggest one is really just Instagram. It's at Nature Nate Geckos, just like it's written on my screen there. 12,000 followers. It's a good time. I like sharing other people's content, and it's a good place to see kind of the wackier things I'm working with. Like I just got a monkey-tailed skink. And there's a video of him eating Pangea. I knew he would, and he did. And it's the blast. That's pretty much it. I don't really have like YouTube or anything. I used to upload like GoPro videos and stuff, but it's really just on Instagram and on Morph Market.
Yeah.
That's it.
Hey, that's where it's
Heck
at.
yeah, dude.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, man. We really appreciate the time. This was a good conversation.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Keep doing what you're doing. You guys are such a positive force, and I love it.
Appreciate that, man.
Come on, Jeremy, get in it. Get in it.
There we go. There we go.
That's how it's ending.
All right, guys. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. See you, man.
All right. Bye.
Bye.